literary and visual, let's just say the autobiography in terms of in literary terms, and the paintings of Elaine plays in these novels, which allows the female protagonists to construct their identities by revisiting their past, and these items are very important, reappropriating their bodies, reconstructing their past relationships, and repositioning themselves in society. They will revisit their past as a way to construct and reconstruct their own identities by means of reappropriating their bodies, because their bodies have been silenced, and reconstructing their past relationships from a new perspective, from a new position of enunciation. Okay. The methodology I have used was the social-critical method, because the social-critical method says it's the analysis of social discourses which are placed in particular historical context, as these novels are entered through different perspectives and different discourses, not only art and linguistics in itself, but psychology, sociology. I needed to make use of different perspectives to analyze these two novels. Yes? Well, the conceptual tools that I made use of were the following. First of all, I analyzed female writing, and I used Monique Wittig and Helen Sixou's works. And I've selected a quote by Wittig in this respect. I've selected one quote for each of these conceptual tools, not to expand my time limit. But I used Wittig's one. She says, "It is by writing from and towards women and by taking up the challenge of speech which has been governed by the phallus that women will confirm women in a place other than that which is reserved in and by the symbolic." Let's just say by the unconscious. That is, in a place other than silence. Women should break out the snare of silence. Wittig believes that through writing, women gain power and they can find their own voice. She coined, she followed what Sixou has coined as écriture féminine, female writing is a very poor translation in English, but which means a women's liberation through writing. Yes? The other conceptual tool that I have selected was fragmented postmodern identities, and within this section I've taken Madame Sarop and Stuart Hall's works. Sarop says, "We do not have a homogeneous identity, but instead we have several contradictory selves. Moreover, I believe that two important features of the human subject are perpetual mobility and incompletion. In a sense, identity is a process. It is heterogeneous. Both Madame Sarop and Stuart Hall believe that identities are fragmented, incomplete, heterogeneous, and they are in constant production. They are never finished. We are constantly producing and finding ourselves. As Lacan has said, we are in a constant quest of ourselves." Another conceptual tool is the modes of subjective representation in art. And I've based these theoretical framework on José Luis. I selected two quotes here because one is more connected to the writing practice and the other is more connected to artistic representations. As regards practice, the writing practice, he says, "I write, therefore I exist." And personally, I love this because he takes Descartes' cogito ergo sum to try to apply it into the writing practice. So it is through the writing practice that I exist. The second quotation is connected to the artistic field, and his work was mainly based on paintings and photographies. He says, "The image is made evident as factory identity, as a place in which the subject is constituted in the course of the representations in the absorption of the succession of its phantasmagories. What he tries to convey here is the idea that through representation, the subject is constituted as such. The next. Well, discursive agency is the other conceptual tool, and in this section I've studied Judith Butler, Alison Blunt, and Jurgensen and Phillips. And the quote is by Jurgensen and Phillips. This quote is more connected to my idea of how discursive practices are placed, which are produced and influenced by society. Judith Butler conceives discourse more as being the product of society. But I believe, and that is one of my points in my work, that we also produce discourses. They say the function of discursive practice, is a social practice that shapes the social world. The concept of social practice views actions in a dual perspective. On the one hand, actions are concrete, individual, and context-bound. But on the other hand, they are also institutionalized and socially anchored. So, discursive practices are both the product of society and determined by society, but they also influence those practices. The other conceptual tool is the body, the theory of the body. And I've made use of Michel Foucault's studies and Monique Wittig's. Foucault says in this respect, cultural values emerge as a result of an inscription on the body, understood as a medium, indeed a blank page. In order for these inscription to signify, however, that medium must itself be destroyed, that is, fully transvalued into a sublimated domain of values. Foucault's ideas are connected to the body as being a tabula rasa in which inscriptions are inscribed on the body. And this will be shown especially on Iris's body. The last conceptual tool that I make use of is post-colonialism. Since Canada was an ex-colony, and since many of the characters in the novels are influenced by the consequences of post-colonialism, I thought it was convenient to make use of this tool. And I read Bill Ashcroft, Karen Griffiths, and Helen Stephen in The Empire Writes Back. Imperial relations may have been established initially by guns, gun and disease, but they were maintained in their interpellative phase largely by textuality, both institutionally and informally. Colonialism is an operation of discourse, and as an operation of discourse, it interpolates colonial subjects by incorporating them in a system of representation. They're always already written by that system of representation. So, colonialism is no longer, at least in these works, is no longer expressed with war, as it says here, but with the text. Yes? Well, I'm going to briefly read the table of contents. I made a change according to your suggestions. In the first section, I devoted my thesis to the introduction in the first section. I did not include I changed that. I'm going to include the theoretical framework on another section, section 2. And within the theoretical framework, I worked with the concept of identity, the construction of the female self, the construction of the subject through narrative, and then discursive agency and the body and discourse. These sections are based on the conceptual tools I have already explained. Then we have post-colonial Canada, the symbol of the mirror, and Margaret Atwood and Hamlet. The third section is devoted to the blind assassin in 3 sections, subsections. Textualization of the awakened female body, and fiction and reality in the construction of identity, and last, Canadian national identity and past. Section 4 is devoted to cat's eye in 4 subsections. First of all, we have Canadian identity in cat's eye, especially with dislocated identities. Then the recreating power part. In C, we have the concept of time, and then home and homelessness. And the last point talks about the political female body. Section 5 is the conclusion, and the last section is the bibliography. So now I'm going to devote this part of my presentation to the main concepts on the blind assassin. Well, first of all, the textualization of the awakened female body. Iris's body within the whole narrative becomes political, taking into account what Monique Witting has written about political bodies. While constructing the text, her own autobiography, Iris constructs herself. So the construction of the text and the construction of her body, of herself, becomes it's a process that takes place at the same time. The bruises that she has on her body, which were made by her husband's beating and abuses, are the marks to be decoded, to be read. These marks will be the text also. And I selected a quote as regards this. She says, "It must be remarkable how easy I bruised," said Richard, smiling. Yes, that tells a lot. So, according to Foucault, Iris is a tabula rasa. She's written and rewritten by others. Her body is written and rewritten by others. She says, Iris, "I was sand, I was snow, written on, rewritten, smooth altered." At this time of the narration of the novel, she has no volition yet. She has no power. But little by little, she will gain power through her writing process. So, as I have said, the text becomes the body. And later, at the end of the novel, the text and the body will become one. And the text, the autobiography, will be the only source where to find Iris. And that is the legacy that she will deliver to her granddaughter, Sabrina. And this quote is about this. She's addressing Sabrina. She says, "By the time you read this last page, that if anywhere is the only place I will be." So after her body extinguishes, because eventually she dies, she will be found in her text. So the self, and connecting that to what Sarot and what Stuart Hall have studied, is permanently made and remade. It's permanently constructed. And she says, that is another advice, it's another legacy that she leaves to Sabrina. You're free to reinvent yourself at will. So it's up to you. You are a subject who could be in a constant state of reinvention, let's say. The next subsection of my analysis is about fiction and reality in the construction of identity. The Blind Assassin is a very rich novel because it's built up out of a mosaic of text types. And that variety of text types becomes a means to recover past events and in this way construct female identity, because we have access through the protagonist's events through different perspectives and from different genres. The text and that variety of text types is a vehicle to communicate, to uncover long-kept secrets by the Laura and Iris too. The other section is the Canadian national identity and past. Different generations of Canadians in the text try to find out who they are and where they belong, and what it is to be Canadian. But we have a difference here, because older generations still feel they belong to the British. In fact, they belonged to the British Empire, but they still pay homage to the British in terms of cultural values, customs, etc. But there's a new generation of Canadians who, through linguistic terms such as, and I'm going to mention one example, the adjective Victorian, just the previous one. The adjective Victorian has two different connotations all along the novel. For older generations, the adjective Victorian has a positive connotation. But later, with Mrs. Fitzgibbons, for example, who within the 60s and in an artistic context, the adjective Victorian becomes pejorative. So the new generations in Blind Assassin want to find their own Canadian identity, what it is to be Canadian. Okay, now, so to make a smooth transition from the Blind Assassin to the analysis of the Blind Assassin and Cat's Eye, I've ended my analysis with post-colonialism in the Blind Assassin, and I will begin with post-colonialism and Canadian identity in the Cat's Eye. So, in Canadian identity in Cat's Eye is the topic. We experiment Anglophilia in Cat's Eye, especially when Elaine went to school in her school days. Due to, we see examples of how the school is decorated, the pictures of kings and British kings and queens, and that fosters the victim position that Atwood has explained in Survival. She wrote Survival as a way to find Canadian, to try to, find what it is, what Canadian literature is. And she theorizes on the topic of victim, what it is to be a victim, because she believes that Canadians assumed the position of a victim, and she develops 4 victim positions. That Anglophilia is connected to the victim position Atwood describes in Survival, because by paying homage to foreign rulers, they feel victims. Yes, they feel not as important as the British. So, Atwood, what is important about this is that Atwood, as a national writer, constructs a narrative that rescues the notion of nation. And she makes use of the metaphor of the mirror that Lacan had coined and has studied. Lacan says that we can get full representation of ourselves once we look at a mirror, a symbolic mirror or a real mirror, because we cannot, we need the other to complete our gaze. So Atwood uses that metaphor in 2 terms. First of all, Atwood's narration is able to look back in its own history, to acknowledge the British legacy, and later place itself in the historical period it belongs to in order to redefine its own national identity. Also, that reflection on the mirror would be partial or incomplete. The national identity it attempted to redefine will be fragmented. And Elaine will remain to be fragmented all along the novel, and she ends up her novel after the retrospective being fragmented too. The next. The next topic is, as a subsection, is the one about dislocated identities. In a country which is post-colonial, a country such as Canada being post-colonial, it offers shelter to many other nations to take refuge there. So Canada becomes a multicultural country, a mosaic of socially constructed others, a refuge for split selves, displaced subjects who, once reunited, need to construct themselves from the margins they still belong to. And we have several examples in the novel. One example is Mr. Bancheri. His father's, Elaine's father's colleague at university, who came from India, and he left all his family in India. And he tries to insert himself in Canada, but he cannot. And Elaine feels attached to this character. Mr. Corbin, who was the art teacher and who was called DP, displaced person, by his students, and he ended up being Elaine's lover. So she sympathized with these displaced characters. And last of all, we have Miss Stewart, who was Scottish, and she was her school teacher, and from her she has access to arts and access to other cultures, to arts. So these displaced identities which appear in the novel are characters to whom Elaine feels some kind of attachment. Then the other subsection is the recreating powered arts. Artistic language in that side is a way of constructing oneself differently and of deconstructing what has been culturally inherited in order to stand not only in a new place of enunciation, but also in a social position located elsewhere in the culture. Through art, Elaine can analyze the paintings that she had painted sometime in her life, especially the paintings about Mrs. Smith and Cordelia, to place herself in a new place of enunciation, to detach herself from these characters who had influenced her. So, Hyde, in this respect, Hyde has written, the oxymoron of autobiographical fiction in Cat's Eye authorizes a reminder that the self of self-representation is always seer as well as seen, and that both seer and seen are implicated in the social construction of how one looks. So, Elaine, she's the eye, she's both seer and seen, because she's the one who has, now she becomes the analyst of her own paintings, as well as the one who is there. So that, again, takes us to the mirror phase that Lacan has analyzed. She has, she's the protagonist of her paintings, but now she's in a detached position, in a new place of enunciation, and she can analyze them from a different perspective. So, the end of the retrospective in Toronto for Elaine becomes a rebirth. Why a rebirth? Because she gains freedom from the contradictory feelings of hatred and love towards some characters of her past, Mrs. Mears and Cordelia. So, by means of this rebirth, Elaine reinvents herself. She reconstructs herself. The concept of time is very important to the whole layout of this novel. The concept of time that we cannot separate it from place. I would take a postmodern conception of time. From the first, one of the first pages in the novel, she reflects on what time means, and this is what she says. Time is not a line of a dimension, like the dimensions of space. If you convert time, if you convert space, you can bend time also. And if you knew enough and could move faster than light, you could travel backward in time and exist in two places at once. Continue. Okay. So, through this conception of bending time and of changing in time and time occupying a dimension, time occupying a place, she feels free to develop her narration with a coming and going, a constant coming to the past and going to the present, so that again we have access through different perspectives and a more complete perspective on Elaine's identity. Place. We have Toronto becomes the main setting, yes, of the novel. But also Toronto is the place which is described as it's associated with oppression. Whereas the wilderness for Elaine is associated with freedom of escape. She makes a quotation by Albert. We drive north. Toronto is behind us. I began to feel not gladness but relief. My throat is no longer tied. I've stopped clenching my teeth. The skin on my feet has begun to grow back. My fingers have healed partially. Remember that she used to bite her fingers and her toes as a way to express her anxieties and dilemmas. Okay. The other section is connected to the political female body. The political female body in Cat's Eye is going to be represented by the grotesque. A grotesque is a term which was analyzed by Bakhtin mainly, and it shows that which does not fit cultural beauty standards or inner beauty, and to present the unfit in the concept of exclusion. The grotesque body is repulsive. But the grotesque body, as it is the body of becoming, is connected to identity processes. And it's also incomplete. Yes, it's the incomplete body shaped by history and culture, taking Foucault's analysis on the body. And it is the unconscious, expressed by Freud in these terms, and the semiotic expressed by Vittel in these terms. How does the grotesque take place in the novel? Well, basically by means of the pictures Elaine has painted of Mrs. Smith. And we have a description here. Over her dresses, she wears large aprons stuck at the bosom and make it look as if she doesn't have two breasts, but only one. A single breast that goes all the way across the front and continues down until it joins her waist. Imagine the whole panorama we have here. She has thin cotton socks above which her legs rise, white and sparsely haired, like a woman's mustache. She has a mustache too, like Grace. She does not laugh, because she says that they don't show their teeth. They just smile a bit, but they don't laugh spontaneously. This is the most description of the grotesque body I have found. But bodies also, in Cat's Eye, are hidden by means of using disguises and masks. These disguises and masks work similarly to the effects of time upon the dislocation of her subject and contribute to the dynamics of multiplication and social construction of her female subject. Elaine, when she was young, tended to dress, when she went to college, she wore black colors because that was the fashion at the artistic college in which she attended. So she wore the same clothes, or the same type of clothes that her university mates wore. And when she was at school, she had one dress for birthdays and 2 or 3 clothes which were the same that her brother had used. And she felt quite neglected by her friends, who had been quite cruel to her by means of the clothes that she had. So, from all of these, from that experience, clothes, fashion, has become an icon, a very important element in Elaine's personality. And she used fashion not as sexually, with sexual connotations, but as a disguise, as a mask. And okay, thanks. At the retrospective, when she wants to find some items of clothes to wear, she goes to the center of Toronto and she cannot find anything that hides herself. And this is what she says. What I'd like is to be transformed, which becomes less possible. Disguise is easier when you're young. Yes? So she cannot find the appropriate item of clothing for to hide herself at the retrospective. Well, this is the last point in my analysis in my thesis. So I'm going to, from the items I've analyzed here, I'm going to jump into the conclusions that I have arrived. I've selected a quotation by Stuart Hall as a trigger for my conclusions connected to identity. He says, identities are constituted within, not outside representation. They arise from the narrativization of the self. So, the writing practice in both characters, Iris and Elaine, become a talking cure. They construct their own identities through their writing processes, because in both cases we have an autobiography, but at the same time they relieve themselves from the burden they had endured in their lives. That's why they can be considered a talking cure. So, again, the subject, I believe, and the scholars that I have quoted believe that the subject is in a constant state of self-quest. Identities are fragmented and fractured. And again, from these concepts, we arrive at Lacan's metaphor of a mirror, because we always need the significant others to see a reflection on them. And that metaphor of the mirror is also applied to Canadian identity. How Canada needed, in the novels that I have analyzed, to see itself from the eyes of the others. The USA or Britain. These two novels are concentrated on place-based memories, which become political in witty terms. And they give voice to the heroine's silent female bodies. In both cases, we have examples of silent female bodies. On the case of Iris, because her husband and her sister-in-law, Winifred, have silenced her, they have repressed her. And in the case of Elaine, her school friends also, sorry, and their tortures influenced on their silencing of her body. And those bodies which have been silenced have a story to tell. And in this respect, I've selected a quote by Whitley, which it says, "Writing is a privileged space for transformation," agreeing with my quotation by Stuart Hall. So by writing, they transform themselves, they recreate themselves. In the case of Elaine, the retrospective of her paintings, through the retrospective, she can recover and reconstruct herself only when she's able to take control of the gaze of the others, as Lacan has said with the metaphor of the mirror. And also, we as readers have access to the reconstruction and self-recovery of herself through the autobiography, which she's telling us. So, the narration of her own art and past is a way for Elaine of politically positioning herself. In the case of Iris, her autobiography ends up being her body. Her body will finally become her text after Iris' death. So the text and the body will become one, and it will be the legacy for Sabrina. Okay, the construction of a Canadian identity echoes the self-quest process that both protagonists undergo in the novels. This protagonist, well, in the case of Iris, she finally dies, but in the case of Elaine, she will remain being fragmented, incomplete after the retrospective, after the end of the novel. So, also, Canadian identity, I would suggest, is incomplete and fragmented. So, again, this echoes Lacan's mirror. So, my overall conclusion, mainly about Atwood as a Canadian national writer, is that these two novels that she has written redefine Atwood as a cultural Canadian icon, since in terms of vision of Canadian literature and Canadian national identity, sorry, I will read it again. Yes. These novels redefine Atwood as a cultural Canadian icon, since in them, visions of Canadian literature and Canadian national identity are problematized. Yes? And this is the end of my presentation.
Very good and very clear.
Thanks. Thank you.
Now if you want to sit down,
okay, I will drink some water. Yes.
Yeah, for the
thank
interview, you can relax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I start?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
It's more. Okay, I love your presentation. You wrote when referring, and I don't know whether you were referring really to the blind assassin, but I would like to answer my question by referring to Iris. You wrote, I write, therefore I exist. Well, this coincides with the change in philosophy, the change we refer to as the linguistic term, right? Remember that the paradigm of the conscience, I think, therefore I am, has been replaced by an intersubjective paradigm from the point of view of Habermas, Rorty, etc. Now, in the novel, The Blind Assassin, this writing, is it mainly monologic or dialogic? Just think for a while. Iris is writing.
Yeah. Well,
is it mainly monologic or dialogic?
I believe she has always her granddaughter in mind, Sabrina. She finds as a legacy for her granddaughter. So in that case, that would be dialogical.
Excellent. You are applying Bakhtin's point of view. There is always you write
for a reference in mind.
Okay, excellent. And any other possibility?
We consider that it is an autobiography in which we write the events of our lives. In that case,
what other voices can we hear? Go on, please.
No. I'm just planning to say that as it is an autobiography, we write also for ourselves. And in the case of Iris, she's writing as a way of paying justice to the atrocities that she had to endure also. So in that case.
But what other voices can we hear in her writing?
Women's voices, female voices.
For example?
Laura's voice.
Yes. Her sister's
Her
voice.
well, she
and May's voices as well.
They're very powerful at the beginning, May's voices. But in the case of Laura, at the end of the novel, Iris says, she was my left hand. I was my right hand and she was my left hand. So we constructed this autobiography together, one complementing the other.
Okay, so it is highly dialogic from every point of view.
Yes.
We have applying back
in
theory. And another question, when you, in your conclusions, when you speak in terms of Canadian identity as being incomplete, can you think of a complete identity?
No.
And in terms of nations, but anyway, up to a certain extent, you are right in using this epithet.
Yes.
For example, what would the difference? What difference do you find between, on the one hand, Canadian identity or American identity or British identity, which were the three instances you mentioned?
Yes. I believe that the difference is mainly by the appearance, what they are, how they are projected. The British are projected as with a more closed identity, or more fixed identity. The same as the American. But the feeling that I had when I was reading the novel was that the Canadians still needed to be projected, to project their own identity on the eyes of the British or the American. In that sense, I felt...
How can you explain this? If in the case, let's leave Britain apart, but if in the case of America and Canada, they are more or less the same age.
That's why, yes, that's why it's more connected in their projection, because the American being a powerful nation and colonizing Canada through culture, through films.
It has to do with power.
With power. With power. And how they project themselves.
What a beauty identity to me, but you're right, it has to do with power.
It has to do with power, definitely, because the DP that she talks about are minorities that have no power in Canada, and that's why she feels identified as a woman with those minorities.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you. When I loved your thesis, and I thought it was very well written. When you were talking about these characters, the female characters, that they construct their identities and reconstruct themselves through writing, I was thinking of not only about Laura, not only about Iris, but also about Laura Chase.
Yes.
That even though she does not write, she is quite similar in the way she constructs her identity as Elaine.
Exactly.
And so it's not only... I wanted you to expand on the ideas in which ways Iris and against Laura and Elaine construct their identities. In which different ways to construct their identities?
Laura tried to construct herself through the photographs she decorated, and also through secrets and the notebooks she left with those crosses and marks, for a future Elaine to decode those secrets. But she found in those sources the way to because her body has always also been silenced. So she found that as an escape, as a way to tell what the atrocities that she had to undergo, and in that way construct herself to find a voice.
But she does it through paint, through photographs.
Through art,
and the way she retouches,
exactly, through artistic,
modifies the photographs by coloring them in different shades.
Yes.
But still, it's through art.
Through art.
Even if it's not through writing.
That was exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Because that was
because in both novels we have the pictorial or visual art and the written aspect.
Exactly. Yes.
I also also loved your thesis. Yeah, and I was interested in that aspect of the role of the photographs.
Yes. It echoes Elaine's way of representing herself.
In a way, she does not do it in such an overt manner as Iris, that says, I'm going to sit down to write a autobiography for my granddaughter, but she's sending the hints for them to read her, as she would like to be read.
Exactly.
And the other question I had is, you talk about Iris being a tabula rasa, being written by others, but don't you think that the moment she recognizes that she needs to give a voice to what she thinks as a woman, doesn't she become a tabula rasa for herself?
For her,
She starts rewriting
herself, her body.
Yes. So it's not only the others that write on her.
At first, it was the other, but there's a moment in Helen when she changes, and she because first she says, my left hand is writing for me, having no volition on her hand, but then she takes a hold of her own hand and she starts rewriting herself, rewriting what others have written on her.
Which is becoming in control of agency.
Of her discourse, of herself, of her body, of her discourse, of her past.
Just had a comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've enjoyed your presentation and reading your paper and your presentation as well.
Thank you.
Okay, then I suggest the members of the board come with me to the office to write the final report, and I can give you the key to the classroom so that you switch off, and then you can go to the canteen and have something to drink.
And where are you? Upstairs?
Upstairs in my office.
Okay, where is it? Because it is
First it's second floor.
Okay.
Second floor.